In the old world, Antioch was a name with weight, stone and scripture, trade and pilgrimage, a city that watched empires come and go. In the world of Trench Crusade, it became something else, a wound in the earth that refused to close. The first thing you learn, if you live long enough to learn anything at all, is that war does not begin with a trumpet. It begins with a decision that feels small from a safe distance. A treaty signed, a congress convened, a vow spoken with steady hands. Then, years later, someone else has to stand in the mud and make that vow real with their bones. Antioch died in 1545. Not to siege, not to famine, not to plague. It died to something stranger and worse. The chronicles say the city was destroyed utterly by a mysterious infernal weapon. No heroic last stand, no clean ruin, only a crater and the lingering presence of demonic essence. Lethal, patient. And yet the faithful did not abandon it. That is the first note in the long song of New Antioch. They stayed. Even as mighty Constantinople fell to the legions of Chimaris, Marquis of Hell, the garrison in Antioch held their positions among the ruins. They breathed poisoned air. They watched shadows move where shadows should not move. They refused to let the crater become a doorway wide enough for hell to stroll through at leisure. There are places in this world where retreat is sensible. Antioch was never one of them. The old city had always been the first line tested, the first wall struck, the first prayer answered with steel. So in 1559, the Sword Congress of Vienna agreed to rebuild and fortify the city, not as a jewel of civilization, not as a proud capital, as a fortress city, a blade sunk into the ground, point first, and left there to hold the line. The agreement did not stop at words. It demanded payment year after year from all faithful nations. And you should understand what that tithe really is, because it tells you what New Antioch truly means. It is rarely coin. Instead, it is supply trains without end. Food, tools, ammunition, weaponry, machinery, skilled workers and engineers pulled from their homes and sent east. Blood sent to a heart that must keep beating, or everything dies. From across Europa and the Mediterranean, and from African dominions as well, the lifeline stretches. Every mile of it is hunted. Heretic infiltrators and raiders stalk caravans and ships. They turn supply into a constant game of cat and mouse. Because if the cat wins often enough, New Antioch starves. And if New Antioch starves, the Levant follows. This is what makes New Antioch a principality in more than name. It is not merely a city, it is an agreement made physical, a global decision forged into walls. Those walls were completed in 1595. Imagine that. A generation after a city is erased by an infernal weapon, stone and steel rise over the crater like clenched teeth. The lore sampler calls it the most important fortress city in the world, the sword and shield of Europa and Africa. And those walls have faced 8 great sieges. They have never been breached, never. 77 mighty towers stand along the line, not as ornaments, but as counting marks. Each one is a place where you can die doing your duty. Each one is a place where someone else will take up arms and keep firing. But stone is only stone. What makes the wall watch is something far more unsettling. Embedded into the fortifications are hundreds of anchorites, metallic battle shrines with devoted souls entombed within. Set into the wall itself, keeping vigilant watch day and night. You do not simply man New Antioch's walls. You join them. You become part of the city's body. a living relic welded into the defensive line. When people call New Antioch the home of all our hopes, they are not being poetic, they are being practical. Because if New Antioch falls, the law is clear. All the Levant will be lost. Then Europe and Africa are exposed. It is the kind of truth that makes even proud princes and distant rulers accept an ugly bargain. Better to fight the war here, far from your heartlands, than to wait until the war comes home. So the city swells with outsiders. Walk its streets and you hear hundreds of languages and dialects. Hussars from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth brush shoulders with the last remnants of the Varangian Guard. Street preachers from Eire thunder about duty and sacrifice. They praise Ethiopian soldiery. They demand lives laid down for the cause. And somewhere in the smoke and hymn, you might see a procession of church engineers moving their latest invention toward the front lines. Because in New Antioch, invention is not progress. It is survival. This is not a gentle city. It is watched, patrolled, corrected. The office of the propagation of virtue moves through the streets with tireless purpose. They may turn a blind eye to the revelries of soldiers. Men who die tomorrow are permitted their vices tonight. But the office persecutes even the slightest deviation from church doctrine. Executions of heretics are a weekly spectacle. They draw immense crowds. In New Antioch, righteousness is not a private comfort. It is public policy. It is enforced with rope and flame. And over it all hangs the city's industry. Factories spew black smoke as newly constructed tanks roll out of workshops. Foundries burn white-hot day and night to keep the artillery battalions at full strength. New Antioch's pride and joy. The scale of this war is not measured in squads. It is measured in the ability to feed guns that never stop needing to be fed. The law sampler speaks of titanic artillery, pieces exceeding 300 feet, constructed in the foundries of New Antioch, matched by hell's own obscene answers. Engines like the dreaded mouth of hell, measured in blasphemous numerology. Between these forces lies no man's land, pockmarked into a hellscape by barrages so immense they feel less like battle and more like weather. This is the world New Antioch stands in. Not a single front, but a centuries-long pressure. A grinding contest between human logistics and immortal malice. And here is something that is both comforting and horrifying. New Antioch does not stand because the faithful are always stronger. It stands because hell is not always united. The law sampler states it plainly. New Antioch could never withstand the full onslaught of combined heretic forces. It survives because of ferocious internal conflict among devils. Archdevils and princes of hell bicker and plot. Supremacy shifts. Invasions mount only when one gains control long enough to coordinate. To immortal beings, the war has barely started. They can afford to savor agony across slow centuries. So the war comes in rhythms, long years of silence, then sudden, ferocious assaults. A city that is always preparing, always repairing, always hungry. At the center of this machine of faith and war stands a title of unrivaled prestige, the Duke of New Antioch, nominal supreme commander of the faithful armed forces. But titles do not control men who traveled thousands of miles to die under their own banners. Troops swear fealty, yes, yet many operate in their own units, under their own leaders. New Antioch becomes a crucible where disciplines and doctrines collide. Some renounce citizenship entirely and take up the cross to serve Duke Constantine alone. Those who do form the principality's standing army, the greatest single fighting force the faithful can muster. And if you ever meet one of them, you will understand why they wear their livery with pride. Pride is sometimes the only thing that keeps a person upright when trench water is up to the knees. In recent years, recent by the strange standards of a war that has lasted centuries, the Duke has dispatched small forces into no man's land. For intelligence, for other grim necessities. The details are not spoken loudly. Saying them loudly can feel like an invitation for hell to listen. But the pattern is clear. New Antioch does not merely endure. It reaches out with cautious hands. It tests the wire. It probes the dark for weaknesses. And then there are the things New Antioch makes. Things that should not exist, but do. In the techno-laboratories of the city, the church toils to create communicants, superhuman warriors empowered by the cloned flesh and blood of the Redeemer. It is stated in the law with chilling confidence, as if cloning divinity is simply another tool on the workbench, another lever to pull because the trenches demand it. Thousands of workers die each year in horrific accidents and overwork. Great statues celebrate their sacrifices around the city. That detail matters. New Antioch is not defended by soldiers alone. It is defended by laborers who never see the front, yet die for it all the same. Crushed by machinery, burned by foundry heat, spent like fuel. And the city makes monuments of them. Because in a holy war without end, even exhaustion must be made sacred. When night settles over New Antioch, it does not bring quiet. It brings a different kind of noise. The distant thump of guns, the rattle of trains, the grinding cough of industry, the muttering of prayer, and sometimes, carried over trenches, drifting like a sickness you cannot wash off. Song. There are hymns in this world that heal, and there are hymns that ruin. The law sampler describes heretic choristers, wretches who mutilate themselves to death at black altars. In rare cases, they are reborn after 9 days, severed heads, singing agonizing hymns learned in the inferno. Their song fills the minds of their enemies with visions from the pits of hell. It weakens resolve. It saps strength. It is often the first thing a fresh recruit experiences on the battlefield. A voice rolling across the trenches, proclaiming a never-ending prophecy of hell's final victory. And New Antioch, being New Antioch, has an answer for that too. Not a cure. Not mercy, a ward. There is a wing in the great military hospice of New Antioch for those who never recovered from hearing the chorister's dirge. Minds forever lost in visions of eternal damnation. Bodies tied to iron frame beds. People screaming of the world to come, under darkness lit only by eternal flames. So when you hear someone call New Antioch the home of all our hopes, remember the full weight of the phrase. Hope here is not a sunrise and a soft voice. It is a wall with entombed watchers. It is an engine that burns people into smoke and calls it necessary. It is a hospice ward of screaming survivors whose wounds are made of sound. It is a city built on a crater left by a demonic weapon, daring the abyss to try again. And still, people come. They come because this is where the story of the world is being decided, in mud and steel. They come because every other place can pretend the war is far away. New Antioch cannot pretend. That honesty, brutal and absolute, becomes its own kind of magnet. They come because if the line holds here, Their children might grow up never seeing a heretic banner on their own horizon. And they come because New Antioch, in its harshness, offers something simple, a purpose with clear edges. Hold the wall. Feed the guns. Purge the heretic. Endure the silence between assaults, knowing the assault will come. Because hell is immortal, and to it, this war is only beginning. The greatest cruelty in New Antioch is not that it demands everything. It is that it may demand everything forever. And yet the city stands, 77 towers, unbreached walls, 8 sieges endured, 1,000 languages in the streets, black smoke rising like incense, anchorites watching without sleep, a duke with an honoured title and impossible burdens, a tithe that arrives as food and metal and men, a war that never truly leaves this corner of the world. So if you are listening to this after a long day, if your hands ache from work, if your eyes are tired from staring at small details, if your mind is seeking a place to rest, then rest it, briefly, on this thought. In the world of Trench Crusade, New Antioch is not safe, but it is steady, a single, stubborn heartbeat at the edge of the crater, and as long as it beats, the rest of the world gets to dream, however fitfully, of one more tomorrow. And that is where we will leave New Antioch. Thank you for listening and for spending your time here in the trenches with me. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more narrative dives into dark worlds and deep lore, consider subscribing. New stories and explorations will be arriving regularly. Until next time, hold the line. The trenches endure.